Fait qu'aujourd'hui, ma présentation, ma conférence, tu pensais que c'était ça que c'était, mais c'était pas ça que c'était. Je veux parler vraiment d'IA génératif, puis j'avais un titre vraiment nice. Je vais commencer par ça. Mais bref, je vais me présenter en premier. On va aller plus vite. Commence par ça. Hugo, je travaille chez Vuban depuis peut-être une dizaine d'années, puis je suis rentré chez Vuban comme développeur à la base, puis on parlait déjà d'intelligence artificielle. V'là 10 ans, c'était vraiment moins à mode qu'aujourd'hui. On ne parlait pas encore d'IA génératif, c'était très basic. Puis, tout de suite en partant, moi, je voulais faire de l'intelligence artificielle, donc j'ai parti le département. J'ai été le premier dans le département d'intelligence artificielle chez Vuban, puis maintenant, on est pas loin de 25. Puis j'ai fait une trentaine de projets chez Vuban. Fait que, l'intelligence artificielle, non. L'IA génératif. En fait, je trouvais que mon titre était vraiment hot, mais je n'avais pas encore trouvé mon storytelling. Puis j'étais samedi, puis j'étais à la table de cuisine, puis je travaillais un peu sur la conférence. Ma blonde était comme, viens, non, écoute un film. Elle était en train de choisir un film sur Netflix. Puis là, je fais, ouais, c'est quand même plate d'écouter un film. À chaque fois que j'écoute un film, après 15 minutes, le film est arrêté. Puis elle me regarde, puis elle me dit, ben, qu'est-ce que tu aimerais écouter comme film? Je dis, mais j'aime les Stanley Kubrick, mais je ne sais pas pourquoi il n'y en a pas des nouveaux. Fait qu'il n'en sort jamais. Fait que j'aimerais ça un film dans le style de Stanley Kubrick, un mix avec Interstellar parce que la musique est nice. Je veux qu'il y ait des voyages dans le temps, puis je veux qu'il y ait un allure un peu vintage, le style, je veux qu'il y ait du grain dans l'image, tout ça. Elle dit, je pense pas qu'on va trouver ton film. Puis mais elle me regarde et elle me dit, ouais, mais les AI, ça fait pas ça, ça me parle tout le temps des AI. Sûrement que ça a été 4 qui créent un film avec les AI. Je fais comme, asti, non, fallait pas que je sac ça. Fait qu'elle me dit, je fais comme, super, c'est mon idée. Fait que j'enlève Netflix, je me pars mon club vidéo, Canadian Club Vidéo. C'est pas pire? Fait que là, j'avais un plan, j'ai mon storytelling. Fait que tout ce que j'ai de besoin, c'est une idée, de l'AI, j'ai un film, j'ai mon club vidéo, je fais du cash, puis je pars en jet privé. Ça vous va? Fait que mon idée de film, je l'ai appelée Valkyrie 9. Fait que dans un futur lointain, l'humanité a découvert un moyen de voyager instantanément à travers l'espace grâce au saut de singularité. Une technologie basée sur l'exploitation des trous noirs artificiels. Ça va bien jusqu'à maintenant. Mais lorsque l'équipage du Valkyrie 9, un vaisseau de recherche avancé, tente le plus grand saut jamais tenté vers une galaxie inexplorée, quelque chose tourne terriblement mal. Fait qu'un film directed by moi-même, la musique par Suno, puis écrit par ChatGPT, of course. Fait que là, j'avais mon idée, mon plan avance, je suis rendu aux deuxième étape de mon idée, trouver de l'AI qui est capable de me faire un film, je tire mon idée à l'AI. Fait que là, j'ai cherché un peu, puis je me suis rendu compte que je pensais que c'était ça que c'était, mais c'était pas vraiment ça que c'était. Fait qu'il a fallu que je change mon plan un peu. Fait que je me suis dit que l'AI, il devait avoir un moyen de faire ça avec l'AI, mais que c'était un petit peu plus complexe que juste un morceau d'AI. Fait que j'ai élaboré mon plan. Fait que normalement, je ne sais pas s'il y en a ici qui ont déjà fait des films. J'ai déjà fait ça un peu dans le passé. Puis, on part d'une idée, on va créer un scénario, on a des séquences qu'on va filmer finalement. La voix, normalement, quand on filme les séquences, la voix vient avec. Dans ce cas-ci, imaginez un film d'animation, on va vouloir doubler le film. Dans ce cas-ci, je vais créer des images avec l'IA, donc il va falloir que je crée la voix. Il va falloir créer la musique, puis faire du montage. Puis vous vous souvenez que mon idée au départ, c'était de faire du cash, fait que mon but, c'est pas de tout faire à la mitaine tout le temps, parce qu'on peut le faire à la main, c'est juste vraiment chronophage. Mon but, c'est d'automatiser tout ça. Il faut que ça soit automatisé. Fait que je suis parti avec une coupe d'outils que je savais qu'ils connaissaient, plus ou moins off-the-shelf. Fait que Grok, je l'ai rajouté là parce qu'ils ont sorti Grok 3, puis je voulais le tester pour coder avec, fait que je l'ai mis là. Les outils principaux, là, ça va être OpenAI. On va travailler pas mal avec OpenAI, du Python, Eleven Lab, Runway, Operator, je vais tout y repasser. Fait que je pars de mon idée. Première étape, parce qu'on va avoir besoin. La première étape, c'est de créer notre idée. On l'a fait. Deuxième étape, c'est de créer notre scénario. Fait qu'on va avoir besoin des taux de l'API d'OpenAI. Fait assez simple. Vous avez probablement tous déjà installé un API ou un pip install. Faites-vous du Python? Ouais. Fait que vous êtes correct à installer un package pip. Donc, je vais partir de là. C'est pareil comme dans ChatGPT. J'ai un prompt. Dans ce cas-ci, je dis c'est quoi la capitale de la France? Au final, c'est assez simple. Tu roules le script, puis ça te donne la capitale qui est Paris, right? Donc, je vais aller directement à la fin parce que j'ai décidé de faire une démo live. Puis, vu que la démo prend un certain temps à rouler, je vais la starter là. Puis, on va écouter le résultat de la démo tout le monde en même temps. Puis ça va être la première fois que je le vois, fait que ça se pourrait que ça soit drôle. Fait que je le starte là, puis j'espère que rien plante parce que on ne sait jamais. Avez-vous confiance? Il va-tu starter? Ou... OK, good. Ça starte. Fait que je pars de mon idée de film. On va y arriver. OK, bon. Je suis rendu à l'étape de faire mon scénario. Fait que je suis parti de mon idée de film, puis j'ai juste dit à l'API ou à OpenAI ou à whatever, comment l'appeler, à mon modèle de langage, j'ai dit « Écris-moi un scénario », puis j'y ai tiré mon idée de film. Fait que j'ai pris ça, j'étais allé dans le code, j'ai écrit mon prompt. Une couple d'affaires là-dedans, là, je voulais juste vous parler un peu des détails, là, mais je vais rester là. Tu as mon idée, mon prompt, puis tu as un max token qui est, ici j'ai marqué 500, mais au final, c'est si tu dans le fond, de la façon que ça marche. Pensez-vous que les AI pensent? Non? Ça va? OK. Je voulais juste en être sûr. Là. Dans le fond, les AI voient chaque mot, c'est des tokens. Je raccourcis, ce n'est pas nécessairement chaque mot, ça peut être des parties de mots qui sont des tokens. Fait que dans ce cas-ci, j'ai marqué un max token de 500 juste pour pas avoir du texte à l'infini. S'il crée trop de texte, il va couper à 500. Tout simplement. Fait que là, il m'a créé mon premier scénario qui est correct. Mais il manque des affaires dans mon scénario. Comme je vous disais tantôt, il va falloir que je crée des séquences. Puis pour créer des séquences, je vais avoir besoin d'une image. Puis en plus de mon image, je vais avoir besoin de la voix, donc des dialogues. Fait que clairement, ici, ça ne marche pas. Fait que si je crée mon scénario, il me manque clairement des descriptions claires de qu'est-ce qui se passe en ce moment dans la scène. Puis il me manque le dialogue. Fait que c'est là que je vais rentrer un peu dans le prompt engineering pour venir travailler un peu notre prompt et obtenir ce qu'on veut. Fait que je repars de mon scénario. Au départ, j'ai dit « écris-moi un scénario ». Fait que la façon que ça marche, je vais y aller vraiment high level, un modèle de langage, c'est que si je dis « ma couleur préférée est », on va essayer de prédire le prochain mot. Puis pour être capable de prédire le prochain mot ou le prochain token, il y a besoin d'un peu de contexte. Fait que là, si je ne donne aucun contexte, il va me dire « ma couleur préférée est », puis il va me sortir bleu. Puis la raison pourquoi il me sort bleu, c'est parce que la plupart des gens en Amérique du Nord aiment le bleu. Fait que ça, c'est la plus forte probabilité du prochain mot, c'est bleu. Mais si je dis « je suis Batman, ma couleur préférée est noir », fait que je viens de rajouter du contexte, fait que là, il est plus précis à prédire le prochain mot. Fait que c'est ce qu'on va appeler le setting de contexte. Fait qu'il y a plein de principes dans le prompt engineering. Setting de contexte, zero shot, one shot, few shot, chain of thought, que je vais revenir un peu plus tard. Donc, dans notre cas ici, je set le contexte, je dis, tu produis des scénarios classiques pour des courts-métrages 5 minutes. Je veux la description de chaque scène ainsi que les dialogues soient concis. Fait que je set mon contexte, j'y passe, puis il me sort ça. Fait que là, pour l'instant, on commence à se rapprocher un peu de l'objectif qui est, j'ai une description, puis j'ai des dialogues. Avez-vous déjà vu un vrai script de film? Peut-être, maybe. C'est pas exactement comme ça que c'est fait, les scripts de film. Si je prends une scène connue, la scène du cheeseburger dans Pulp Fiction, vous voyez qu'il y a le nom de l'acteur, en dessous, il y a le dialogue. Puis c'est découpé comme ça. Fait que tantôt, ce qui est sorti, c'est pas exactement comme ça. Puis les descriptions... Oh, je suis allé trop vite. Fait que ce que je vais faire... Je suis allé trop vite 2 fois. Fait que mon prompt, dans le fond, c'est que j'ai mis le contexte, mais j'ai mis aucun exemple. Puis quand on met aucun exemple à notre contexte, on appelle ça du zero-shot prompting. Fait que j'ai juste dit, donne-moi ça, puis je m'attends une réponse, mais il n'y a pas d'exemple.
We get to talk about turning features on and off and how that's different from deploying releases. Here's the part where I tell you, I am definitely going to post the slides on my site tonight. Have you heard that before? Have you heard that today? Did it work? Which is why I've already got my slides online. They are online right now. Achievement unlocked. Woo! Let's head off to robrich.org, robrich.org. We'll click on presentations here at the top, and here is feature flags. The slides and the code up on GitHub are online right now. You can follow along. You can heckle me about the slides I haven't done yet, but the slides are online. robrich.org. Head over to presentations, and you can grab the slides and the code. While we're here on robrich.org, let's click on About Me and see some of the things that I've done recently. Microsoft and Docker have given me some awards. Redgate as well. AZ Give Camp is really fun. AZ Give Camp brings volunteer developers together with charities to build free software. We start building software Friday after work. Sunday afternoon, we deliver that completed software to charities. Sleep is optional, caffeine provided. If you're in Phoenix, come join us for the next AZ Give Camp, or if you'd like a Give Camp here in Montreal or wherever you traveled from, then find me here at the conference, hit me up on any of the socials here up in the corner, and let's get a Give Camp in your neighborhood too. Some of the other things that I've done, I've gotten to work on a few books, a Cypress ambassador, that was brand new, that's really fun. One of the things I'm particularly proud of, I replied to a .NET Rocks podcast episode. They read my comment in the air, and they sent me a mug. Woo! So there's my claim to fame. I commented on a podcast. So let's talk about feature flags. Feature flags. Here's the methodology of feature flags. We have an if block. If it's enabled, then do the new way. Otherwise, do the old way. And then we have some data store, some config file, some spot that lists all the flags and whether they're on or off, true or false. That's feature flags. Thanks for coming. No, I'm just kidding. It's an amazingly simple concept. And so we'll take a look at different implementations, but at the end of the day, we'll keep coming back to this. It's an if block and a data file. Where we choose to store that data file, what else we choose to do as we're evaluating our flag, that's a lot of the nuance and context that we'll dig into. But at its core, this is it. If it's the new way, then do the new thing. Otherwise, do the old thing. Cool. So anti-patterns. Here's everything that we had before feature flags were a thing. Have you heard the term code freeze? Wait. Everybody stop being productive while we wait for that thing to happen. Oh, by the way, go faster. Yeah, that's a complete anti-pattern, and we'll be able to solve that with feature flags. Hey, can you deploy this, but not that? This one our users want really aggressively, but that one, marketing isn't ready to release it yet. Can you just not deploy it? Oh, hold on. Let me do a whole lot of Git magic to be able to unmerge the thing, and now we have code that really hasn't been tested together, and this is the thing that feature flags can solve. Hey, I committed it, but I'm not done yet. Can you not deploy it quite yet? No, the release is scheduled for today. You remember the code freeze thing? Yeah. If you've heard any of these things in your team, then that's where feature flags can really help you be much more productive and help you yield really elegant results. Feature flags allow us to not stop being productive, but instead to separate deployment from feature release, to separate pushing the code to servers from displaying the features to users. That's feature flags. So we're going to develop the new code right next to the old code. We'll compile them both. And then at runtime, we will switch between them. If this flag is turned on, we will go do it the new way. And if the flag isn't turned on because the code isn't done yet, we're not ready to release it to users yet, then we can just turn it off. We're still deploying the code, but we're not running the code. What's really cool as we start pitching this to our business managers, the business value is really elegant. We can deploy to the servers when the developer is ready. We can turn on the feature when business is ready, when marketing is ready. Which, by the way, no longer need to be the same time. We deployed the new release. It's ready to go. Whenever you want to do it, then we'll just set a flag. And they're like, no, but we need this midnight call where we all do the... No, it's already there. Let's just turn it on. Oh, by the way, the bug fix that you wanted is also there, and we can turn that on when you're ready too. Feature flags. In essence, we are now separating the deployment from the release. installing it on the servers from handing it to users. That is really powerful. And what's really powerful is it is a very, very simple methodology. It's just an if block. So we start off and we deploy it, but we turn it off. And then when we're ready, we switch it on. Walk over to the thing and flip the light switch, and now that feature appears to our users. That's really cool. We avoid late-night deployments. We avoid out-of-order deployments. We turn off features that are misbehaving so that suddenly our server isn't getting taken down. Ops can tune the app based on turning these flags on and off. It's a really powerful methodology that allows us some really, really great business value. And it's just a simple code methodology. If it's on, then do this. And if it's off, then do that. And store the content of whether they're on or off in some data store. Now we're going to look at a lot of different ways to implement this, a lot of different benefits and drawbacks. And so the cool part is that as we look at each of these, we have different ways of storing these flags that will allow us different features and methodologies. We can choose to use external services, a SaaS product perhaps. We can store them in a database. We can store them as environment variables. Maybe we have a config file and override it with various environment variables. And as you grab the code from robrich.org on GitHub, we'll see different examples of each of these. And what's really cool in each of them is I have a .NET implementation and a Node implementation. So if you like curly braces, you can do that. And if you like prototypal inheritance, you can do that. And each of them are running implementations where we can take a look at how these work. So let's go through each of them and take a look at how we might do it. One of the things that's kind of interesting is we can think about how easy it is to just do a query on the server. Let me read the config file. Let me make that change. But what about browser apps? How do we do feature flags on the browser? Do we now need to bake the configuration into the Webpack build or the Vite build such that now how do we turn the flags on and off? Well, what's cool is we can just create an API endpoint on our server that just either accepts a flag name and returns a value, or one service that returns all flags. And now we've just exposed those dynamic flags to a client API, a client app, a browser app, and they can now turn these things on and off based on these flags. Now there is some nuance there, we'll come back to that, but client-side flags are not all that different. Yes, we could choose to bake them into the build, but instead let's use an API to be able to hit those up. We do need to make sure that we have sensible defaults here. What if the data store is unavailable? What about the time that it takes to load that data store asynchronously? Especially in a client-side app, if it has to do a web request before it gets the feature flags to know what to turn on and off, then we do need to have sensible defaults. Usually, the sensible default is to turn it off. We're going to start by deploying it off, and so that seems like a good default. We don't want to have a feature light up and then suddenly go away. And so if you have sensible defaults, probably off, then false, then you can now take appropriate action. Or show a loading screen, a spinner, a skeleton until the feature flags are loaded and you know how to turn those on and off. Best practice, make these feature flags temporary. Have you ever opened up Chrome flags or Netscape Navigator's options screen or Firefox's screen and start clicking buttons there in the options to turn things on and off? Yeah, you can do some really interesting things, but none of us ever do. These were feature flags that they used to build their web engines, and then they left them forever. The hard part is that we do want to obsolete these flags in time. We want to make sure that as we get to the point where this feature is stable and running and ready to go, then we remove the feature flag and we remove the old way, and now our code is leaner. We don't need to maintain both sides indefinitely. Let's instead get to the point where that feature flag is obsolete, remove the old way, and that feature flag. So one best practice is to add an expiry date to the data store. Now the cool thing about this expiry date is we could put in, say, an integration test that says, do a warning when the feature flag is getting close to expiring, and fail the build when the feature flag is expired. Okay, I may be creating technical debt where you're like, but we're not ready, so let's just push the dates forward. Let's set the date to, I don't know, 2100, so we don't have, yeah, we need to use these feature flag expiries appropriately. If, I don't know, 90 days isn't long enough, then push it another 90 days. But make that decision consciously and carefully. If we have expiry dates, we can say, oh, well, this code has been running in production for a week or a month. We think we're good. We can probably rip it out in the next release, the next deployment. Context. We'll see as we get into the demos how context can be really powerful. Now, not all features need to be 100% on or off. Maybe we can evaluate different details about the request and turn these features on or off based on details within the request. So for example, we could take a look at users and their roles, their claims, their permissions. We could look at the user subscription plan. We could look at their location. I want to turn this on for North America, but nobody else. Or I want to turn this on for Europe, but nobody else. We could take a look at system load. Well, this new feature is consuming a whole lot of CPU. Let's just turn it off. Error rate as well. If the system's circling around the drain, let's turn off that expensive feature. We need to be careful with this because this is not an authentication or authorization system. We're not granting user permissions to various features. Rather, we're giving early access to features to particular users. In time, these flags are still temporary. They need to be removed. If we're starting to grant access to things, move that into the authorization system. Don't put that here in feature flags. So that was really cool to kind of dig through some of the principles and the thoughts. Any questions, any concerns, anything that I missed so far before we launch into demos?
Yeah, why are you not putting the feature flags in the session or the authentication token?
Why am I not putting feature flags in the session or the authentication token? That is really interesting. I've chosen to put them separate from the user because in most cases they aren't specific to the user. But I love that thought. If I'm considering the context, then putting feature flags in the JOT sounds like a really intriguing idea. I like that. Yeah?
What about database updates?
Database updates, yes. Clearing the cache is hard. We're going to come back to that one. Ask me that in 2 demos. Cool, so now we kind of understand the principles. Let's start to look at how we might implement this. Let's start out with a config file. And we could override the config file with environment variables, but let's start out with a config file. On the upside, this is drop dead simple. It is really, really easy to implement. We put a flag in our source control, and now we can just turn this on or off. The downside is we probably baked that config file into our build, so flipping the flag requires a deployment. Wait, weren't we trying to separate deployment from release? Well, we'll just set them as environment variables. That'll be really cool. But if we set them as environment variables and we change those environment variables, Docker is not going to pick that up automatically. So we may need to kill that Kubernetes pod to get the container to restart, to reread the environment variables to be able to, wait, we just deployed again. So let's take a look at this. Here's the link to the repo if you're just starting with the slides. We'll come into demo 1, and let's take a look at configs. So I'm going to launch this. Let's say npm start. I'm going to do the node examples here if that's OK. And we'll come to localhost 3000. And I have a few things here. I have these URLs that I just kind of put in this page just so that we can see them. I want to say, is this feature on or off? This feature is enabled. Cool. Let's take a look at the code that made that happen. So I'm here inside my source. I have my routes. Here's my features. And I want to take a look at feature 1. I'm going to just go get that flag. I'm going to pass in an enumeration here in TypeScript just because, that avoids magic strings. But I could have passed a string in as well. And I just want to say get the value of that flag. If it's on, then I'll say it's enabled. If it's off, I'll say it's disabled. How am I getting that flag? Let's come here into utils, features, get flag. So I'm just going to look for process.env.feature underscore that key. That kind of helps me protect against if you were to say, ask for the feature flag path or password. I don't want to expose bad things here. So I'm going to, obfuscate those a little bit. And then let's take a look at how we set these. Well, together with my other configuration, I'm going to say feature 1 is on, feature 2 is off. And so back in our list of things, here's feature 1, it is on, feature 2 is off. Well, in the case of feature 2, I'm going to say if it's on, return JSON. And if it's off, return text. So let's come over here to feature 2. And feature 2 is disabled. So we can come in here and say, well, actually, I would like to turn it on, please. And because this is a config file, yes, we do have to restart the app. But where previously it was disabled, now I refresh it, and now it is enabled and behaves very differently. Cool. Our new way was to return JSON, and so we kind of wanted to move in that direction. But our old way was text, and so until we're ready to break those existing clients, then we can just turn that feature off, and now people using the service will get it the old way. And when we're ready, we set that environment variable and we turn it back on. Now there's one more thing in here, this URLs, features 3. Actually, do I have a feature 3? Nope. Oh. Features, feature 3. I do have a feature 3. I need to update my list of routes. Feature 3. So let's go look at feature 3, and feature 3 is off. Now feature 3 is off because, well, some enterprising developer forgot to set the flag. Feature 3 isn't set at all. So we do want to have sensible defaults here. What we did here in our feature process was we said, go get that thing, and if it's undefined, return a sensible default, in this case, false. Otherwise, go try and parse it as JSON and return false. Well, why would I do that in JavaScript? Because there is a difference between false and false. Because, of course, that one is false, and that one is false. Because quote false is actually truthy, and so using JSON.parse would do it. But what if JSON parse does bad things because it's not set, and thus the catch and returning false? We do want to be careful. This is a config file that users are futzing with, so we want to use that appropriately. Cool. So we also have, let's say, all. Go get all of the feature flags. I'm going to go loop through all of my feature flags. I'm going to return them all. And in this case, 1 is on, 2 is off, and 3 is off. And so now I have this cool way to be able to collect them all. I did add an endpoint here just so that I can take a look at things. Here's env, which will just kind of spit out the environment variables. Did I parse it wrong? Or did it not exist? Yes, this is definitely a debugging one, which is why I also highlight it right here as, this is a security hole, don't do that. Okay, so I was able to pull these from a config file. How might we do this in a client app? Well, I have this client app right here. Let's fire up this React app and take a look at it. Now this React app, I'm going to go I just have these three components, feature 1, feature 2, feature 3. Why are they separate components instead of a generic one? Because, well, it's fun to do this. I have this hook, use feature flags. Use feature flags will then go look to this. We create a provider so that we can go make this request to features/all. We'll get that response, and we'll set those flags. And so then when you want to ask for a thing, we don't need to re-query the data store. We already got it. And so now we can say, let's go grab this feature flag, and we'll return that context. We do have a refresh mechanism, which is really cool. So then when the component wants to do it, just says use feature flags. It now has a list of flags. And so we can go look at, is that flag turned on or off? Cool. So let's do that. Let's come over here to, what port did it launch on? 4000, localhost 4000. And we've got our app. So feature 1 is disabled. Feature 2, oh, this is cool. Not that. Let's come here into feature 2. Well, feature 2 is going to say, if the flags are loading, I'd like to do a skeleton. I want to have sensible defaults, in this case of hiding it. And then if there's an error, I'll show the error. If it's enabled, I'll show it's enabled. If it's disabled. But I also want this refresh button. Maybe we're doing this on a timer every few minutes or every hour or so just to make sure that our configuration is fresh. So I just wanted to demo that. Here's that refresh button. So I click refresh. And now it loads for a bit and then shows the new value. And then feature 3, let's take a look at feature 3 because that's kind of fun. Feature 3, we will say, well, we want to show, if it's enabled, we want to show this new image. If it's disabled, we want to show the old image. So let's come back over here and say feature 3, true. And it's a config file, so let's go restart the server. My terminal just went nuts. There we go. Restart the server. And now, let's refresh these feature flags. And did my thing not start up? Oh, I bet I didn't save. That would be hilarious. Did I spell feature 3 wrong? Fail. Port is 3000 in the console. Feature 3 is on. Yeah, the server is 3000, the client is 4000. Oh, I bet I know what's wrong. Nope, I don't know what's wrong.
It's not the same ENV file. It's a different ENV file.
Is it a different ENV file? Okay, I'm going to walk away from this demo in a second, but let me just see if I was... yeah, this is hilarious. I named them badly. This is feature 3. There we go. And now it's enabled. Woohoo! I got the beta channel. That's cool. So let's go turn that flag off for a second. And we will restart the server, but not the client. And we will refresh the client. And now we've backed out that beta channel feature. Cool. Well, that was a lot of fun. We got to look at putting them in a config file. Yes?
I know it's a developer conference, but why would we need an API here when we can generate all these JSONs as simple files and just pull the files instead of dynamically opening the file,
Ooh, yeah, good call. What if I just pushed these config files, this end file, as a static file for my API? Why would I build like a REST endpoint around the top of it? I love that thought. How would I turn them on and off? Do I push a new static file?
No, you can generate the JSONs out of that once. For example, during deployment, or you have a script to do this separately, but without the API. This
Yeah.
will definitely improve your performance, and you will be able to scale this without a server, because you can just cache static files.
Yeah, that's interesting. I could choose, instead of creating an API like this, I could choose to take that config file and bake it into the client build. Now I don't need another API call. The interesting thing about baking it into the build is now, yeah, my app is more performant. It's a static asset into my thing. I can heavily cache that in a CDN. The downside is, if I want to flip the flag, I must redeploy. And so which option is better? It depends which feature I like. Do I want to be able to flip the flag quickly, or do I want to have higher performance? Ultimately, yeah, you can choose in that element and pick the option that is best for you. Great idea. Any other questions or thoughts on this config file demo?
Sorry,
Yeah.
I think you can do both ways. You can have one server that is having the API for you, and represent the output as static JSON that is cached by your CDN.
Ooh, yeah. My API is cached by the CDN, so now I get less traffic against my API. That's intriguing. Cool. Next up, let's take a look at feature flags in the database. And before I forget, I'm going to fix the bug in here and in here. Cool. Close all. I get the sense that we may not be done with that bug. So let's move our config store from a config file into a database. Now on the upside, it's really easy to change at runtime. I might be able to create a dashboard that is, select star from this table. I build some dynamic view that gives me toggle switches. I can just flip it on, and now it's ready to go. On the downside, how do all the apps know that that feature flag changed? Do I subscribe to changes? That isn't really a thing in every data store. So we may have a time, depending on how long it takes for the app to notice, where some servers in the cluster do it the new way, and some servers in the cluster do it the old way. That is a really interesting downside here. So let's take a look at feature flags in the data store. Let me stop this and stop this. OK, I'm going to npm start this server. And let's take a look through. Oh, that's cool. So the feature flags didn't exist in my database because my database didn't exist yet. And so I just created them. 1 is off, 2 is off, 3 is off. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. I've never had them all be off as I started up. What is the difference here in this server? Well, if I take a look at this, here's my routes. I go get the flag that comes out of this flag repository now. So let's pop open that. And this flag repository just does select from that table where the key is what we expect. Let's take a look at, and then we have a get all that does that get all. Let's take a look at our database. We just have a table that says we have a key that is a string and a value that is a Boolean. Yeah?
Well, it was kind of in relation to the question you had asked earlier, which was how do you know when to clear the cache?
Yes, how do you know when to clear the cache?
And I mean, I guess it depends on the nature of the feature, but does it really matter? I mean,
Ooh.
if it's, say, Facebook and they're rolling out a new feature to millions of users, what does it matter if a user gets it 1 day later versus a user that gets it now?
Yeah, good call. I love that. If, let's say, this feature flag was on Facebook and certain users get the feature today and certain users get the feature tomorrow, is that okay? In this case, yeah, that business rule is great. So who cares about the cache? That's awesome. I love that. Thank you for that point. So who's the DBA who's going to call me out for using a string as a primary key? Yes, this table design is awful. That's OK. I could put an auto-incrementing primary key in here, but I'm never going to query by that. I'm never going to reference it by that. So yeah, my primary key is a string. But I'm going to go say, go get the count, and if there aren't any, then go create some, and I'll build a whole bunch of random things, and away we go. And so that's the code of building up this data store. So we did an npm start. We filled out some feature flags there. Let's come into this client, npm run dev, and let's start out with the server. The server is on port 3000. And we've got that same list of URLs. I'll just jump to the end. Features all. 1 is off, 2 is off, 3 is off. I'm going to be a dork, and I'm going to delete my database so that it might regenerate with some values of each. And let's start this again. Ooh, 2 of them are true now. Cool. So now 1 is true, and 2 is true, and 3 is false. So if we come to features 2, the one that returns, nope. If only I had a page where I could navigate to them. Because 2 is on, now we're returning JSON, and away we go. That's cool. Back in the all, we can see these. So let's come back to our client UI. And we can see that 1 is enabled, 2 is enabled, and 3 is off. Cool. Now, the interesting thing is our client didn't really change at all. Our server only changed in that process of resolving the flags. And so that was cool. We moved our data store from a config file to a database where we can turn these things on and off a lot faster. Yeah, if somebody had built the demo differently, we could have a dashboard where we could turn them on and off, and that would be kind of cool. Cool. So we moved it to a place where we can turn them on and off, but now we have a potential stale cache concern. And if our business is really sensitive to that, then that is a concern. Any thoughts on putting flags in the database? Yes?
On the cache level, I don't understand why you need to cache it.
Ooh, why do I need to cache it? That's interesting. I guess I took a logical leap here. I'm going to query it when my app starts up, and then I may re-query it once an hour or so. But I'm not going to sit here re-querying it every second to see if it changed. Yeah. If it's fast, maybe that's not an issue. I like that. And instead, maybe my data store is an event store. And so now I just receive updates when they change, and I can populate my current version. That could be another way to avoid that caching issue. I like that. So let's talk about context overrides. Now, we might have different places where we do context overrides. This is not an auth system. On the upside, the flags aren't 100% on or off anymore. On the downside, we have now a more complex configuration system. So let's look through this, and let's take a look at the overrides. Now, the server, the majority of it is the same. As I look for features, I'm still just calling getFlag. In my thing, I'm just selecting that from the flag. But I also have this name override to say, hey, if I've got a name, let me do that differently. So as I generate this, I'm going to create this feature flag table. I'll create this intermediate table, or this user table, and then this user flag table. I'll populate it with data for John and Jane. So let's go into that one. And in this case, 1 is off, 2 is off, 3 is on. John got 1 off, 2 on, and 3 on. So it looks like 2 is the one that's different in that case. That's awesome. Let's come to our client. And I won't run the server end of it because that's probably less interesting. Instead, I'm going to load the client here. And we now have a new box that is a login. Now, this login box is implemented incredibly badly because our goal is not to be an auth system. The login is accept a name and save the name. So yeah, not an authentication system, but that's not the purpose of this demo. So feature 2 is off, but if I log in as John, then feature 2 is on. That's kind of cool. If I log in as Jill, then, well, Jill doesn't have overrides. Does Jill have overrides? Did I do that name wrong? Yeah, there's John and Jane, but not Jill. So because Jill isn't a user in this user store, they fall back to the originals, and these originals is 3 is on, 2 is off, as opposed to all the other ones. So here's 2 that's off. Cool. So we have overrides here. One of the things that I was going to show you in databases is that we have tests that validate that the features are not expired, which is pretty cool. And so I'll just tag that one real fast. Cool. So next up, we want to get flags from a service. Now, on the upside, we probably end up with much more advanced features, much more user elegance things, an elegant dashboard. We get local caching. It can probably push updates to us in ways that a data query, we'd have to architect that. They have interesting things like A/B flags and analytics. On the downside, what to do when I'm making the call to the service? What if the service is down? I have 3 demos, Launch Darkly, Harness, and Azure App Configuration. For the sake of time, I'll just do the Launch Darkly one. Let's take a look at how that works. So here in Launch Darkly, the client did not change at all. But here, I just go grab my Launch Darkly SDK key, and then when I'm getting my flag, then I'm going to build up this context, the user information, and I'll just say client.variation, and I also pass in my default value in case this can't get to the service. So it will pull from the service periodically, and away it goes. On the server, on the configuration side, I now have this dashboard that allows me to turn features on and off. So 1 is off. Let's take a look at this one, and we can turn it on. And now away it will go. Well, I'm going to turn it off for a second, and let's start up this server. Now, I didn't change my client because, well, the client isn't going to do anything differently. We're connected to the server. That's great. And so while I'm here with no login, then we see that feature 1 is disabled and feature 2 is disabled. Well, we come in here to this dashboard, and we want to turn feature 1 on. And based on who's logged into the dashboard, we can also talk about why we changed it, demoing at ConFoo, and now we can audit, well, Rob was the one that changed it while on stage at ConFoo, and we have a little bit more context. That's pretty cool. And we come back in here, we changed nothing, and feature 1 is enabled. We got a whole lot more advanced features here because we're using this service whose whole purpose in life is to build these feature flags. Was that better or worse than, say, the one that we did last time in the database? Maybe. Is it worth the cost of admission? Probably. At the end of the day, though, we have lots of different places where we can put these config files. We could put them in an external service like LaunchDarkly or Harness or even AWS parameter store. We can put them in a local data store, or we can just bake them into config files. At the end of the day, though, feature flags is this methodology. If it's the new way, if the feature is on, do it the new way. If the feature is off, do it the old way. And the cool part is that methodology, just that separation between deployment and release, allows us some really, really interesting benefits. We no longer need to stop being productive just because we want to turn something on, because marketing said, okay, it's time now. We don't need to worry about misbehaving code. We can just turn that feature off until we get to a point where it's stable. And we can offer our users beta channels. Hey, do you want to be an advanced user? Do you want to be able to see things as we're developing, get early feedback, pay us more? That can be really cool. Where feature flags works really well. If I'm building new modules or replacing algorithms, I can use feature flags in a really elegant way. Where I can't use feature flags very well is small bug fixes or database schema updates, maybe wholesale system rewrites. In these cases, running the new code and the old code simultaneously doesn't really work. If I've got a bug fix, I'm just going to fix the bug. Now, I put modifying existing code in both of these lists because if I just want to modify some existing code, the way I would do it with feature flags is I would duplicate that function. Or maybe I duplicate the entire class file. Then I make the change, and I commit the new thing together with the feature flag. Well, what does the git diff look like? The git diff looks like I just invented an entirely new class. So what did I change? And then eventually, the old class just goes away. And now who wrote every piece of line of code in that new class? Yeah, feature flags for modifying existing code can be hard. The methodology is you have to be able to duplicate the code to change it. So yeah, modifying code is one of those weird things. But what's really cool, we can separate features, separate deployment from release. We can deploy to the servers when the code is ready, and we can deploy to users when the business is ready. This has been a lot of fun sharing with you feature flags. Thanks for coming.